A judge who recently ruled against Donald Trump, their house was set on fire. It's unambiguously arson. The only way, I don't know how many of the family escaped. The only way they escaped was by jumping out of an upper store window. I think they used an explosive device, if I remember. I'm sure the article will clarify. Stephen Miller was called out for MAGA's violent rhetoric after a fire tore through a South Carolina judge's home. Diana Goodstein, who ruled against the Trump administration in a high-profile voter registration case, had been walking her dogs on a beach when her 1.1 million Edisto Beach house went up in flames around midday on Saturday. Live shot of the fire. Oh, there we go. That's what we need. Really went up in flames. Like really, really, really went up in flames.
You can hear this thing burning.
Let me guess, it was a right-winger? We can probably assume that fairly. We don't know. We haven't caught the perpetrator. But, you know. 3 people were hospitalized after the blaze, which is being investigated by authorities. Her husband, Arnold Goodstein, was forced to jump from the first floor to escape the blaze. He's understood to have suffered multiple broken bones. A jump from the first floor. Okay, so the broken bones then are because he's old, I assume. A former Democratic state congressman and state senator. 2 others were rescued by neighbors and paramedics from a marshy area at the rear of the house. Goodstein's son, Arnold Goodstein II, classic, is also in the hospital. The extent of his injuries is not known. I heard the fire had anti-ice written on it in Sharpie. First floor is high up. Look at the porch. That's true. It is an elevated home. Stephen Miller and MAGA World have been doxing and threatening judges who rule against Trump, including Judge Goodstein. This is just one of in a chain of high-profile acts of violence against Democratic law officials, just unparalleled. You know, the same thing is not happening to Republicans. It's just not, no matter what way you slice it. Some comments of SCOTUS on violence against judges. Of what relevance is this? Are we going to get endorsements of violence against judges from Supreme Court justices? I mean, in this country, maybe. Chief Justice John Roberts has repeatedly addressed threats of violence. F*** you, Roberts. Sotomayor. Well, none of these judges are going to say they're in favor of judges having their houses lit on fire. Well, actually, hold on. Do we have anything here from, no, we don't. Sorry, just Roberts, Jackson, Sotomayor, and Roberts. No Thomas. We don't get the classic Thomas comment of like, she had it coming. Former Trump advisor Stephen Miller criticized on Twitter the South Carolina judge's decision as part of what he called a, quote, legal insurrection, and suggested courts were acting as a, quote, shadow commander-in-chief. After critics warned his language could fuel hostility, Miller fired back in another post, writing, quote, you are vile, deeply warped and vile. While the Trump administration has launched the first ever government-wide effort to combat and prosecute illegal doxing, sinister threats, and political violence, you continue to push despicable lies, demented smears, malicious defamation, and foment unrest. Despicable. Liberal fascism. It does come across pretty whiny, huh? I don't know if there's any, if there's a Stephen Miller, any public appearances or any talks since the burning of the judge's house. I don't know if he's commented on it directly, like, outside of Twitter. Been a lot of stuff from him lately, though. Here we are in Memphis.
Thank you, Pete, Gaddy, Pam, and of course, your governor, for not only being here today, but for the invitation to your state to bring.
Oh no, that's good. Oh, that's great.
Never possibly imagined. To the Memphis Police Department, the officers that I see sitting in front of me, we are about to provide you with a level of support you cannot even imagine. This isn't just a task force. This is a all-of-government unlimited support operation. ATF, DEA, FBI, ICE, Department of War, every resource we have. And they're not going to be sitting behind a desk at a
We are
keyboard.
in Memphis.
We are sending in real cops with guns and badges you never possibly imagined.
Why is this so scuffed?
To the Memphis Police Department, the officers that I see sitting in front of me, we are about to provide you with a level of support you cannot even imagine. This isn't just a task force. This is a all-of-government unlimited support operation. ATF,
Oh, he literally just made a comment? Like 2 minutes ago. He made a comment 2 minutes ago about it. Right here?
You called a legal ruling legal insurrection.
What is with this video? Is this guy a SCP? Why are all the videos of him like this?
No, it's simply a factually accurate statement that when a judge assumes for him or herself the powers that have been relegated or delegated by the Constitution to the president, that is a form of a legal insurrection. And we have seen...
Insurrection carries legal weight, so are you recommending...
We have seen, over the last 9 months, a ongoing legal insurrection in which district court judges, as a class, in many cases, have issued, which is why they've been overturned so much, have issued rulings that are flagrantly unlawful and unconstitutional.
Here, I want to see the full thing, actually. I want to see the full thing, not just the clip.
No way.
There he is. Will you forgive a quirked up white boy with a full bladder if he takes a moment to piss? You're going to have to catch me up on what he says, okay? Have fun. Just give me a sec.
Couldn't tell you what either one was. I hope you're Mike halfway through that moved on Taylor Swift and
We got a good show today.
Hey, Stooge. Hey. Mr. Miller, you just said on CNN that you're abiding by the judge's ruling, but there's a number of federal options. What options are you considering for deploying federal resources?
Well, if I told you right now, they would just start pre-drafting their next motion for a TRO. So I would just say that the president has a very broad range and set of authorities when it comes to deploying federal assets. And again, as you know, we went through this in California with Newsom. He made a total fool of himself, pretending he had the authority to defy a lawful presidential command of the National Guard. We won in the very liberal Ninth Circuit, and a portion of the California
You missed it. He did a cool flip. Fuck!
National Guard has remained federalized to this day.
Should James Comey be perp walked? Should James Comey be perp walked? What other cities is the administration considering sending National Guard troops?
Right. So, no, but there's different events happening in different cities. So here in Washington, D.C., right, working collaboratively and cooperatively with the mayor.
There's a reason this guy sticks to Twitter.
We have a large-scale public safety surge. And as part of that public safety surge, we have obviously all your federal components. I think it's 22 agencies in all. And you have your your city resources, then, of course, the National Guard. In Memphis, very much will be modeled off of D.C., where we have, or is being modeled off of D.C., we have the full interagency, IRS, ATF, DEA, FBI, and HSI. And then you have in that case, you also have the state resources too, the state troopers, state investigatory agencies, then the National Guard. So that's one model. Then in the case of Portland, you have an acute crisis with threats to life and property at the Portland ICE facility. And so that is a reactive deployment. There is a acute ongoing threat to lives and property. And so National Guard was dispatched to protect ICE officers and their property in the conduct of their duties at a federal building. The president has also said that we're
going to talk about this more in the near future, but my understanding is that in multiple locations, the ICE agents are agitating local police, and they are not getting along particularly well. Like, police are still responding, but there are instances of, like, the police getting criticized for not responding to accused threats, and also apparently there have been, like, prank calls in Chicago where ICE tries to get the police to assist them by, like, accusing protesters of committing crimes that they're not committing. So the police show up and the ICE are trying to, like, egg them on to do the arrests, and the police keep getting gassed by ICE.
Immediate future in Chicago, there's a need for the same. Obviously, you saw, for example, there was 2 vehicle ramming attacks against ICE officers in Chicago. The president has indicated in the future there might be additional resources brought to Chicago. But the most recent order that he signed relates to the ICE mission. I hope that answers your question.
Will the White House abide by the ruling?
The reason I asked that, Mr. Miller, is the president has floated other cities, perhaps in New Orleans. Is that still consideration? And is the administration actively considering others?
Yeah, Governor Landry sent a request, as you know, and so we're working with Governor Landry as we speak to figure out an appropriate next step. I'm not going to sit here and say advance what is next. Obviously, in the case, Memphis is a good example, a good model, where the governor reached out to us. He said we've had, in fact, I think Memphis, for many years, had the highest per capita murder rate in the country. He said that Memphis has been suffering from unimaginable levels of crime for years. We want your help. We want the full Washington, D.C. package. As a side note, we meet every week with city leaders here in Washington, D.C., and this has proven to be in their own mind and in their own words, one of the most extraordinary things that anybody has ever seen.
Stephen,
Yes.
Stephen, you said the other day that you want to use legitimate state power to dismantle left-wing terror networks. Which organizations were you talking about, and what kind of state power are you envisioning using?
That's a great question. Thank you. And I'm glad for the opportunity to add a couple more details to that. So the struggle that's taking place right now is between the lawful exercise of power by the American people through a duly elected government versus the unlawful exercise of street violence in the form of domestic terrorism. So,
He's stalling for time. This is one of those talking points that sounds really good when you're like broadcasting it on Twitter and you don't have to clarify anything, you know? The Republic is under siege by the organized terroristic threat of the Democrats, and we will use every power at our disposal to dismantle their organizations. Sir, what organizations and what powers are you referring to? So yeah, the problem here being, of course, that no matter how fascist you are, the government is still a bureaucracy that has to be used in very fiddly, particular technocratic ways. And aura farming on Twitter does not actually directly translate into action.
again, the clearest example of this is when you have ICE officers who are carrying out the statutes and laws of the United States to arrest and remove illegal aliens, who are being subjected to violent attacks in the conduct of their duties. That's an example of illegitimate violence, illegitimate power in the form of domestic terrorism being used to impede the conduct of their official duties. The answer to that, in a civilized, modern, civilized society,
civilized, modern, civilized society,
grand juries, subpoenas, arrest warrants, search warrants, and every other federal power at the disposal of the commander-in-chief to identify and find everybody who is trying to use the real and actual threat of violence to impede the
I'm doubling down on the government shutdown is draining these people of their power theory, because what the fuck is this? I've seen them be more animated in these press. Again, this is the Monday after a weekend where multiple judges put a halt to the deployment of the military in Portland. This is actually a huge challenge that, they are betting all or nothing on their ability to, essentially end democracy through military incursions before the midterms or the next presidential election, pans out and changes the field. They're not doing a very good job defending these points.
Of these federal responsibilities and ensure that they're placed behind bars. I'm not going to give you any advanced information about what these investigations have yielded so far. The Joint Terrorism Task Force has the lead, but they have found that these campaigns, that's not, of course, only against ICE officers. There's also conversation we're having about the assassination of Charlie Kirk, the 2 attempted assassinations against President Trump, the assassination of the United Healthcare CEO, the attempted assassination of Justice Kavanaugh, which, of course, had an insane sentence of 8 years. So it's the broader spectrum of political violence, but obviously ICE as an agency...
Is this still the same question? Yeah, because he's waffling. You notice how, what he should have had was a strong answer, right? He should have either shut down the question immediately with a strong non-answer, or he should have said, which Democrat agencies? Frankly, we need to investigate, because I think many agencies have been compromised by Democratic influence. Which powers? Whatever at our disposal. We're going to use the FBI to uncover all their crimes. It doesn't matter. It's not like he has to follow through on anything. It's literally just what he has to say. I mean, you said it yourself, Vosh. Nobody watches press releases other than us morons. You think he cares about giving answers? He does care, because his lack of confidence means that he can't get the backup that he needs. Confidence is critical, all right? It's the only reason the stock market works. If the people leading the fascism don't sound confident, the people around them aren't going to bet their chips on them. At the end of the day, so much of politics, especially in a coup, in an insurrection, is about how much you can convince the other big players that you're in it to win and they're better off with you than they are against you. You need enough power brokers to be in a position where the risk-reward dynamic favors joining you in the insurrection over keeping safe and staying with the existing regime. How many corporations, how many big MIC players, how many hotshots within the Republican Party would really be willing to commit to being part of the party that ends democracy? Because you have no way of knowing whether that's going to work or how long it's going to last. Some of the people who are in a position to make these decisions, they're in their 40s, they're in their 50s. They're going to be alive when this shit falls over. They need to feel really confident that this is going to pan out in their favor in the long run. If they're just here for what looks like a 4 to 8 year like grift, like looting spree, and afterwards they're pariahs all around the world, that's a bad risk proposition. That's why it's so important for people like Miller to come across as confident. He can still be a weird little Nazi nerd freak or whatever, like he is. I mean, it's not really about his affability. It's about how much he's signaling his willingness to commit.
Has been subjected to a 9-month effort to substitute left-wing violence for the votes of the American people. No federal officer in the conduct of their duties should have to worry about being physically attacked, being physically obstructed, being physically impeded, being doxxed, having a bounty put on them. And the fact that Democrat politicians are trying to normalize this really indicates how far we've gone as a society, that there is not universal condemnation of this organized campaign of violence against ICE officers. Yes.
No, but just to follow up. I don't know of many Democratic politicians who have endorsed these terrible incidences that you just referred to. And I also don't know of any evidence that there's some kind of vast underlying organization funding them. Is that what you're indicating is happening here?
Yes, in fact, we know that it's true. But obviously...
You think Tyler Robinson was being funded by some terrorist organization?
No, what I said was that you asked whether there was some larger criminal conspiracy relating to domestic terrorism in this country. And I said, yes, there absolutely is. Now, of course, Antifa has been designated as a domestic terrorist organization. This is only one example of many in which we have, it's typically a continuum of violence. It involves both organized doxing, it involves violent threats and intimidation.
It's the midwit curse, man. It's the midwit curse. We're going to see this in a second with Curtis Yarvin in the next segment. But, you know, the big thing these people hate, these like slightly higher than 100 IQ fascists, is knowing that all of their policies and all of their rhetoric are intended for 75 IQ people. It eats at them. You know, it's fine for somebody like Mussolini, who is himself 75 IQ, or was, I should say. He's dead now, thankfully. But for people like Miller, Vance, Yarvin, it eats away at them. And they're always trying to distinguish themselves from the masses that they have to appeal to, you know? This is the reason why Trump is so magical. Trump isn't actually stupid. He's insane and a narcissist. And right now he has like super dementia. Like his brain is melted. But he's not actually stupid, but he's always been very comfortable just talking for idiots. I guess it comes from being like a television personality. That's his magic. He is smart enough to be consistently charismatic in a way that benefits him politically, but he's fine talking to the lowest common denominator. It is, in fact, the way he's most comfortable speaking. But Stephen Miller, like, listen to his rhetoric here, okay? And again, do you think Goebbels would have responded this way if asked direct questions by the Nazi press, you know, to get more details on the, you know, whatever to put in their Stürmer?
There absolutely is. Now, of course, Antifa has been designated as a domestic terrorist organization. This is only one example of many in which we have, it's typically a continuum of violence. It's typically a continuum of violence. No, this doesn't work at all, you know? You need short, simple statements made to appeal to the stupid people who like your policies. Smart people, on average, are not buying this, which is why there is a correlation between higher IQ and not being conservative, left or Democrat voting. Not to say every Democrat or leftist is smart, but the stats are in. You know, we know who's going where. There's a reason why educated people are overwhelmingly more likely to not be Republican. So it's the midwit curse, you know? You have all this fire and bombacity, but, you know, you keep it to Twitter, and then once you're actually asked to clarify, you want to make sure people understand you're not stupid enough to think that the bombacity is all you have. But it's all you should have. It involves both organized doxing, it involves violent threats and intimidation, it involves explicit calls to commit violence against a targeted person. And then that tends to escalate into physically violent and obstructive acts.
Republicans are way less disciplined than Nazis. Incorrect. The Nazis were incredibly undisciplined at every level. They were horrible in terms of their organization, their planning skills. They fucked up basically everything. It turns out that zeal and a slight edge on like industrial advancement can actually carry you pretty far. especially in the 1900s, when every day technology leaps forward by like 10% of what it was before. You know what I mean? The clock turns forward pretty quickly. And if you're willing to like conscript 14-year-old boys.
And so it's this continuum that we see over and over again, where they're trying to use illegal violence and intimidation to disturb the operations of the federal government and federal personnel. And we see this playing out over and over and over again.
They? Because Antifa isn't actually an organization, right?
Sir,
Yes.
you've spoken several times about how sanctuary city leaders and state leaders, they might face charges for human smuggling and harboring illegal aliens. Also spoke about 8 USC 1324. And, you know, it's since gotten worse. And today, Brandon Johnson signed an executive order prohibiting use of city property for federal immigration operations.
By the way, that's a great example. On the Brandon Johnson, it's an example of how I was asked the question of, well, do you have any example that this behavior hasn't been condemned by Democrat officials? Well, I can go one better. The mayor of Chicago not only has failed to condemn the violent obstructive acts against ICE and law enforcement, but in the aftermath of 2 coordinated attempted murders of ICE officers through vehicle ramming attacks, he issued a no-go zone for ICE officers. What do we think would happen if, say, under a Democrat administration, Republican officials declared no-go zones for the FBI? What do you think the reaction to that would be? How many people do you think would be arrested and placed into jail over that? And so it's just important to understand these are not isolated incidents. If you can't see, then you don't want to see. In other words, if you can't see that since we've taken office, there has been a organized, systematized campaign to delegitimize, dehumanize, threaten, impede, obstruct, and physically assault ICE officers in their conduct of their duties, then I can't persuade you of it because you're choosing not to see what's right in front of your face.
Liberal fascism, man. Again, this shit reads like in this house we believe all humans are equal, immigrants are welcome, etc., etc. If you can't see that how the madness of this situation, then I don't know what to tell you.
Do you believe that James Comey should be purple?
Yes, back there, sorry.
Jay Jones has not dropped out of the race for Attorney General in Virginia.
Yes.
He's under immense pressure to do so.
Yes.
He hasn't. Does that surprise you?
Sadly, it doesn't surprise me. Look, what you saw with the Jay Jones comments, and it's a piece of this whole conversation, was the deeply held inner monologue of a high-ranking...
It's simply he's a hollow man, he has nothing and believes nothing. No, I disagree. I think he's an actual ideological fascist. A rarity in this day and age where so few people believe anything. But yeah, no, I think he is an actual ideological, like, if you gave him a truth serum and he couldn't lie, and you like talk to him about fascism, he would just straightforwardly defend the principles of like the sublimation of the individual to the state and how you know, democracy is weak and so on. Like he would do all that, you know. There's videos of him as a child saying he loves torture, lol. Yeah, he's been in the bit for a while. Didn't his cousin recently write a big Facebook post saying like, I'm sorry that my cousin is a monster? He used to be cool when he was like a kid or whatever, but now he's evil. He's like Hitler. It's crazy.
Democrat. They're someone who rose to the top of the ranks of the Democrat Party. So if you read the text message exchange, it's clear that he talks this way often and frequently. That is his homicidal ideation and his fantasies about elaborate murder and torture.
His Wikipedia is crazy. He's been trying to become a huge conservative since he was in high school. Yeah, if anything, you guys should learn from his studiousness. I'm not joking. Man's evil, but like there are so many talented left-leaning people out there who, because they're so like apathetic about the ability for like change to happen from the apparatus of the state, they just give up and they all just, I don't know, they do some NGO work and then you work at a firm for a bit and you have cats. I don't know. Like Stephen Miller isn't stupid. Like there are limits to how intelligent you can come across when you're a fascist, but he is very dangerous and he's dedicated his life to destroying the country. You know, I think that you should try to, if nothing else, seek a little bit of inspiration from his enthusiasm and maybe apply it towards better ends. I would like it if we had some, you know, some folks on our side who are anywhere near this competent at getting their agenda put through. Now, I know we're fighting uphill because the Republican Party is much more amenable to Nazism than the Democratic Party is to leftism. But, you know, Mamdani's doing good right now. I'm just saying. We could use some ambitious people.
Is something that clearly he is comfortable with and is doing frequently. So you have to ask yourself, what kind of system is someone operating in where they speak so freely and commonly about, again, elaborate murder plots against people they work with? What kind of system brings somebody up like that and elevates them to the point of nearly being the Attorney General? That's a system that has absorbed this.
It's easy to be a successful Republican. You're literally playing for the winning team. Do you remember what America was like from 2008 to 2016? Like, no young people would admit they were conservative because it was so uncool to be a conservative. Like, it's not like that now, but don't assume the Republicans are always on the front foot. It's there are like oscillations here, you know? It was nice. Yeah, well, it's better than this. That's for sure. Miller was trying then. That's, you know, he's a real one. You think Miller is anti-Semitic? Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Narrative that we see so often, which is that the Republican Party, and in particular that the Trump movement, again from the Democrat narrative, is basically, this is a term I've seen, is unpersoned, right? That they dehumanize you to the point of not having a right to live. And so we saw this, of course, with the 4 years of lawfare against President Trump and the desire to incarcerate him for life. Then, of course, that kind of eliminationist conduct and rhetoric then leads and gives rise to more violent behavior like attempted assassinations. And now, of course, because so much of this conduct was never punished over time, now we see so many Americans, and not all Americans, of course, many foreigners too, who feel very comfortable.
He's legit talking like a liberal right now. Yeah, I feel like there's an upper bound to this kind of rhetoric. You know what I mean? You can only do fascism with the liberal rhetoric for so long, or like this liberal framing for the rhetoric. You know, like words are violence. You need to be careful about the ramifications for your language. Okay, you know.
Engaging in direct day-to-day violence against ICE officers. It's a common experience for ICE officers when they're conducting an arrest to be physically assaulted by others while they are carrying out an arrest. So you might be arresting, say, a child pornography illegal alien, and
a child pornography. This is an elite variant of an illegal alien. They're quite rare, you know, very powerful. Most of the child pornography encounters that you'll have will be in the halls of the White House these days. So seeing them from an illegal, or, you know, you gotta watch out.
You will get physically assaulted while you're doing it. Now ICE have to worry about getting sniped from rooftops when they're coming and going from their facilities. And we've normalized the idea, not I haven't, of course, and you haven't, but others have, that ICE officers should have to work in a federal building every single day where they're attacked going in, they're attacked going out, where every night there has to be street battle against armed insurrectionists every single night, night after night after night. That's normal. You ask why we need the National Guard, why we need troops? Because it takes hundreds of additional personnel, far beyond the resources of the federal officials working in Portland.
That's
to
rough.
Hold and secure a perimeter to provide freedom of movement. And it's not enough, by the way, if you're an ICE officer, just to stand here and put the line back here, right? They're under sniping attack. They're going to get rocks hurled at them, right? They're in physical danger.
That's wait, rocks throwing is sniping? That is that the expanded definition we're using now? Like how terrorism includes judges filing injunctions? This is now a new definition of sniping? Okay.
So you have to clear a safe perimeter so that ICE officers can carry out their duties without being an imminent threat of physical harm. And the fact that we've normalized these attacks on ICE officers, that is how you end up in a society in which domestic terrorism becomes the norm, and eventually
domestic terrorism
elections
becomes
don't
the
carry
norm?
the day because violence beats votes. And that's what we're seeing attempted. And so when we see a muscular response from the federal government, it's because we're not going to let violence beat votes. Next question.
Stephen, 3 months from now,
Yes.
when we're having this conversation in December, what do you see the end game being? Because you clearly don't have trust in some certain local and state law enforcement entities.
How could you?
And so
How could
where
you?
do you see the National Guard? Where do you see the military going? You suggested that if the courts...
I really hope this kind of rhetoric keeps up, by the way, and this is also something we're talking about today, but ICE has been antagonizing the fuck out of local PD. Like, local police do not appreciate very much having to babysit these ICE retards, these stupid fat fucks, like rolling around their city, fucking everything up, tear gassing of the place, having better equipment and like more money than the local PD do, which is insane because it's American police. Nothing should have more money than them. You know? The more local police dislike this movement, the better. And holy shit, I hope they keep it up. There is, and I mean this sincerely, literally no way at all for the Republicans to succeed in ending democracy if they piss off local PD. There are too many police officers in the United States. You cannot do it. If you can't maintain the support of local police, that's it. Your effort is done. There's nothing else that you can do. So please, ICE, continue antagonizing. We'll talk about this more.
Rule against you. You will find other ways to use the military. That would lead me to believe that there's a conversation about the Insurrection Act that is taking place. What should Americans expect over the next 3.5 years, understanding that there is a real likelihood that those same local law enforcement and state officials will never, ever cooperate with your efforts? Should people expect the National Guard and the military in their streets over the next 3.5 years?
Well, I think that most, so to be clear, we talk about the National Guard in their streets. So right now in Portland, we're talking about having National Guard deployed to secure a federal building in Portland. And so there's a lot of elements to your question. I'll try to get to all of them. But, when I hear comments from Democrat officials saying that this violence from the left is being provoked, their word, by the
I noticed that he's not answering the question.
Think about how broken of a sentence that is, right? In other words, if tomorrow we went to, say, Dothan, Alabama, and there was a federal building there, and we put 100 police officers in front of it, it wouldn't be attacked. Nobody would throw rocks at them. Nobody would try to shoot them. Nobody would do anything. They would say, hello, good morning. Maybe they get them a cup of coffee before they go out for their shift for the day. They'd ask, how are your kids doing? How are your kids doing? The fact that Democrats think that their own base cannot contain their desire to inflict violence upon the mere sight. In other words, National Guard's not being sent there proactively. They're being sent there reactively to defend ICE officers under siege. So in theory,
American cops having the Homelander smile moment when people cheer at them arresting an ICE officer, that would be like an actual, that would be like an award-winning generational photo right there. A bunch of guys in like black bloc dress up, losing their shit as Portland PD are like, fucking cops slamming an ICE agent to the ground. Holy shit, that would be one for the fucking history books right there. Real, the enemy of my enemy is my friend energy.
If ICE officers were in their building and the National Guard was in their building and nobody was violently attacking them, the only thing that you would see is there's a building, there's ICE officers, there's guardsmen. The violence is entirely rioters choosing to show up and wage violence.
Why does he speak so cunt? Because he spends all of his time around Trump, who talks like a fucking theater critic?
At a specific federal building. They've handed out flyers. I saw one Antifa flyer recently, and it said, we need to mobilize around the Broadview facilities, this is in Chicago, to shut down ICE. So what does that mean? When they say we're going to mobilize to shut down ICE, what are they saying? They're saying they're going to carry out insurrection against the federal government by using force, obstructive force, to keep ICE officers from going out and conducting arrests. Would we ever tolerate this with any other law enforcement agency? If we said shut down the FBI and say, let's pick one of the organizations.
Shit like this has happened to like basically every federal agency before. It's not new or unique to ICE at all. Though ICE, in fairness, right now is more of a threat to American democracy than any federal policing institution has been in modern American history. Maybe if I ran through my, maybe if I went back to like 1821, the ATF wasn't around back then. Something might have happened at some point. Right now, ICE is obviously in a league of their own. Do you think Miller would ever be electorally viable? No, definitely not. No.
That the media might understand better. So let's say the Proud Boys said we're going to shut down the FBI, and they went and they formed a human obstructive wall in front of the entry and exit to the Washington field office of the FBI, and they attacked anybody coming and going. How many nights do you think that situation would persist for? Not even one, let alone over 100. We all understand this to be true. So to your other question...
We all understand this to be true. Jesus. Funny he would mention Proud Boys here.
Yes, the president has multiple statutory authorities under federal law to secure a federal building. And so
President's definitely
when a
committed
court
multiple
issues an
statutories,
injunction,
that's
the
for
only
sure.
activity that's enjoined is what's specifically enjoined in that order, not activity that isn't addressed or spoken to that order. Was another part of your, in 3 or 4 months. So this is the most important point I can make. This is the behavior of the anti-ICE rioters, violent attacks, doxers, is motivated by a desire to achieve a concrete outcome. In other words, they're
Proud Boys is top of the mind for Miller. This, it might sound a bit conspiratorial. I suspect the reason he paused and then said Proud Boys is because there are a few other relatively high-profile right-wing militias that you haven't seen at all in recent months, and it's because they were recruited by DHS. That when DHS did their massive recruitment wave at the start, so they had enough people to commit this war, this like war of attrition with the American public, they did so with a bunch of these Patriot Front, 3%ers, whatever, and they probably didn't do it as much with the Proud Boys because the Proud Boys were probably the most Fed compromised of those groups. It's barely even a conspiracy. Yeah, it's one of the reasons why they insist on having everyone wear masks. Like, they're really, really... Like, do you really think they give a fuck if ICE agents get doxxed? They don't give a shit about their own people. Also, they're trying to lure you in with, like, sign-up bonuses. They really think that the fucking troglodytes that are buying this are concerned about something as abstract and externalized as if you show up without a mask on your face, you might get doxxed. They can't think that far ahead, and they would do it for free. No, I think the masks are because a lot of these people are known neo-Nazis, white supremacists, militia members, J6ers, etc. And my guess is that Kristi Noem and probably Stephen Miller and some other officials swooped around a bunch of these terror groups and pulled them up, and they're terrified of them getting unmasked because it would actually make them look pretty bad if it turned out all these ICE agents are like known Nazi militia members. That would probably be pretty bad.
objective is fewer ICE arrests in Chicago, fewer ICE arrests in Portland. So very straightforwardly, the way to end this ongoing assault is to demonstrate that they will fail completely and totally.
What do you mean Proud Boys are Fed compromised? The Proud Boys are like a notorious... They're like lol cows, basically. Of all the like right-wing militia groups, they were the most a joke. Like, they were a boys club that was made up entirely of like YouTubers and federal informants. They weren't one of the serious right-wing militias. They weren't like Atomwaffen or whatever. They weren't one of the like real ones. The Proud Boys were just loud because they had a big social media presence.
In other words, if you were able to secure these buildings using additional resources, you're not having your entire federal law enforcement apparatus doing nothing but physical building security. If you're able to use the National Guard to secure these buildings and free up your ICE officers and your FBI agents and everyone else to go out and do enforcement in the community, to go out and find dangerous predators and remove them, you will demonstrate very conclusively, as we did in Los Angeles, by the way, that all your riots and violence will get you is more deportations.
That has happened in Washington, D.C.
That
has happened in Washington, D.C. Has it not? Yet the men and women of the National Guard remain here in the streets instead of being at home.
Well, it's a great example, but not in the way that you phrased it. So I know you all have questions, but it's a
But
great...
why? But I think that's where, if you're a democratic city, you're looking at Washington, D.C. and saying, right, they complied, there is no mass protest, and the crime, President Trump said it's a crime-free city now, so why are the National Guard remaining? And that is why there is such a...
Dog, you're getting bowled over right now. Holy shit.
You're adjacent to a great point. But the reason why there's peace and calm in the city is because the criminal element is understood that their criminal activity will not achieve their desired outcome. That's the most important point. And the second thing is...
You all know what I mean about the rhetoric thing, right? You can understand how this is like innately unappealing, especially to the demographic that he needs to appeal to.
And
the second thing is,
American cities.
Here in Washington, D.C., the National Guard, as John Fetterman has said, is one of the most wonderful things that ever happened to the city. It means you can go out to the National Mall and not have to worry about being attacked. But the other thing is that...
you support them in American cities long term.
The National Guard deployment is part of a cohesive public safety operation, like in D.C. and like in Memphis, is an extraordinary blessing. The tragedy that I see is when...
you support them in American cities long term.
I answered the question the way that I did. The tragedy that I see...
I answered the question the way that I did? Why would you answer? That's essentially like saying, I already dodged that. I already dodged that. Come on.
is when you have a 6-year-old boy, has happened recently, whose killer, who stabbed him in the head till the knife was blunt, got released from jail on good behavior. The tragedy is when you try to murder a Supreme Court justice and you're out of jail in 8 years, right? The tragedy is when you have somebody who's been in and out of the criminal justice system for, well over a decade with 39 arrests, like in North Carolina, and can just walk up to an innocent Ukrainian refugee and knife her to death in the throat. That's the thing that gets me upset. And that's the thing that gets the American people upset. And the second thing to your question is, putting people in jail who are committing this terrorist activity is the #1 most important deterrent.
Yeah, you long-term believe that over the next 3.5 years, that military.
I think everyone wants me to move on to the next question.
Sure, but
thank you.
I've
been very patient. Thank you. Thank you.
Last week,
Everyone here wants me to not answer your question about long-term military deployment to U.S. cities. Everyone here. I'm looking across the crowd here. Everyone here wants to move on. Nobody wants an answer to that.
vote paused infrastructure funding in New York City, the subway, the Hudson River Tunnel, and then he also paused funds in Chicago. They were connected to DEI, but I mean, can we expect, for one, is the administration going after infrastructure projects in Democratic-led cities, and are there other cities that the administration?
It's a great question for Russ to vote. I'll do two more. Thank you.
We're going to hear your full interview with CNN. So just to be clear here, will the administration abide by the judge's ruling? And then also, can you just clarify, is the administration actively looking into other legal avenues to deploy the National Guard in Oregon? Okay. I know you don't want to get into specifics.
According to this New York Times live feed that I was provided, thank you, very helpful chat, rare time, I'll take what I can. It seems that a stop has been put to the judge's block on the Texas National Guard being sent to Chicago, but only to Chicago. So, because there are multiple attempts to send National Guardsmen and multiple efforts to stop them. So right now, apparently 200 are being sent from Texas over to Chicago. LA still has 300 and Washington has 2,400 because they can do whatever the fuck they want to Washington, D.C. Portland right now has none. So far, the judges in Oregon have been successful in blocking all military deployment, whether that be from Texas, California, or from the state of Oregon to the city of Portland. Pretty tiny numbers, though, huh? I mean, 200 in Chicago aren't going to do shit. 200 National Guardsmen? You can barely cover like a tiny fraction of downtown with that. These are still virtue signal numbers. Here, we're almost done with the Stephen Miller interview.
So, yes, the administration is going through the appellate process to obtain relief from the ruling, just as we did.
The rulings on Thursday, a temp stop was not granted. Gotcha.
In the Ninth Circuit in California. And at the same time, we're availing ourselves of all available options, and we'll examine them. All right, I get to do two more questions. That's a short one.
Venezuela. Do you want to see Maduro out of Venezuela? What's next there?
I've nothing to add to that other than what the Attorney General and the Secretary of State have said, which is that there's a $50 million bounty that has been placed on Maduro in connection to his indictment as a narco-terrorist drug trafficker, and he needs to be brought to justice for the crimes for which he was convicted in an American.
He's the Homeland Security advisor. Who cares about this?
Court.
Timeline on that. What is he considering?
I'll get an update from Russ. Yes, sorry.
So regarding the shutdown, both the president and the House Speaker sort of alluded to being open to reforms to Obamacare. What reforms to the ACA would the White House actually support?
My only comment on the shutdown right now is that Democrats should support a clean funding bill to reopen the government, and that it's outrageous to shut the government down. And
Is farmer relief going to be announced this week?
Sorry, back there. Thanks.
Why are White House staffers being let go?
Don't have no information on that.
This week, James Comey is being arraigned. Do you believe that he should be perp walked? Is he above the law? Is Christopher Wray next? And
I sure hope. I don't think to say something. I sure hope that James Comey's not above the law. And I think American people want to make sure that James Comey is held to the full legal standard to which any American who committed similar crimes would be subjected. Next to
you know, an FBI agent was fired apparently for not wanting to arrest and perp walk Comey, his former boss. I think I've had enough of this guy.
Period.
So on the substance of the question, is it the case that, as Pritzker frames it, you are profiling brown people? That this immigration crackdown is designed to go after people of color?
That is it's such a, oh, what a dumb question. The illegal aliens who
That was a very convincing laugh.
are here are taking jobs away from blacks, they're taking jobs away from whites, they're taking jobs away from Latinos, they're taking their health benefits away, they're taking their school slots away, and of course in many cases, period.
So that's really, really, really funny. The Supreme Court literally authorized racial profiling. Yeah, he doesn't even deny the accusation. He's just, you know, I don't know why he wouldn't deny it. I guess he wanted to say blacks. I mean, who doesn't? Oh, man. Hold on.